Magandang araw, Pilipinas!
Ito ang inyong tagapagbantay, Fatima Marcial.
Ang inyong kaagapay, Cyril Mainit.
At inyong kabalitaan, Angel Guaño.
Mga balita'y isisiwalat sa inyo.
Mga impormasyong aming ibubunyag, lahat ay totoo.
Kayo ay nakikinig sa
Triple
P.
Para sa ulo ng mga nagbabagong balita.
Friedrich Nietzsche, kilala na.
Beyond Good and Evil, binigyang kahulugan.
Lahat ng kabanata, iisa-isahin.
Mga pahayag ni Nietzsche, ating isisiwalat.
Para sa pagbabalita, Fatima, andyan ka pa ba?
Yes, sino nga ba si Friedrich Nietzsche? Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher that was born on October 15, 1844, who went on to become one of the most important philosophers of all time. The famous slogan, "God is dead," came from Nietzsche. Generations of theologians, philosophers, psychologists, poets, novelists, and playwrights have been influenced by his efforts to uncover the impulses that underpin traditional Western religion, morality, and philosophy. During the 19th century, he was considered a German philosopher who wrote extensively on consciousness, religion, science, and morals. Then he died on August 25, 1900s at the age of 55.
Beyond Good and Evil was one of the last work he wrote between 1886 and 1888. It is widely regarded as a book written by philosopher for philosophers, and it is one of the most well-known of the truth. It has 9 chapters with 240 pages, paperback. The work goes beyond good and evil in the sense that it remixes traditional morality, which Nietzsche deconstructs in a favor of what he sees as an affirmative approach that bravely tackles the perspectival nature of knowledge and the dire situation of the modern man.
Hi guys! Disclaimer lang. Hindi indicated sa assigned reading namin itong chapters 1 to 9. Pero gusto namin na magkaroon tayo ng background sa mga main points ni Nietzsche na hihimayin natin mamaya. So para sa chapters 1 to 3, hindi na nag-aksaya ng panahon si Nietzsche at inumpisan niya agad ito with an attack on Asian philosophers and religions. He suggests that all religion and philosophy may be summed into simple prejudice, which, not surprisingly, supports the viewpoint of the philosopher or preacher in a highly logical, though complicated, argument. Religion and philosophy, according to Nietzsche, are unable to find universal truths due to their limits. On the other hand, he sees himself as a free spirit and admits that others may exist. A free spirit is someone who is actually capable of thinking for themselves and is not affected by society, the outcomes of their truths, or personal motivation, but solely by the purpose to expose falsehoods. Finding perfect truth, Nietzsche argued, was difficult, but finding falsehood was easier and may lead to truth.
Chapters 4 to 6 expose the most famous view of Nietzsche. The truth and thinking are always changing and developing, which is why the beliefs espoused by religions and philosophers in one period may not be regarded true in another. While the praise "the world is flat" is often overused, Nietzsche expects that all thoughts and ideas follow the same path. According to him, power and will are the driving forces behind the shifting truths and facts. So individuals in position of power, or the power inherent in firmly held popular beliefs, may define reality today, but as the power base shifts, so may the definitions of morality, good and evil. Hence the title of the book, Beyond Good and Evil.
Chapters 7 to 9 is where Nietzsche expands on his writing regarding virtue, culture, and nations before concluding with his definition of nobility and who qualifies as noble. These chapters provide insight into Nietzsche's mind, if only because as a native German, he praises the Jewish ethnicity while criticizing his own country's anti-Semitism 50 years before the Holocaust. Nietzsche's native Germany was not the only country he chastised. He believed the English was on a dark path that would include much more savagery against other nations than Germany. He did, however, see France as the seat of Europe's best days and even referred to the French as having the most polished culture in the continent.
So ngayon naman ay talakayin na natin yung mismong nilalaman ng ating readings tungkol sa mga konsepto ng libro ni Friedrich Nietzsche na pinamagatang Beyond Good and Evil. The reading started with Friedrich Nietzsche saying he hoped to be forgiven for discovering all the sleeping moral philosophy before. In Nietzsche's opinion, virtue is being damaged mostly because of its advocate or believers more than anything else. To give you an easier understanding regarding Nietzsche's work, Beyond Good and Evil is about going beyond the concept of good and evil. Nietzsche rejects the dichotomy of disbelief which most philosophers in the earlier era promoted. Nietzsche's desire is that only as few people as possible should reflect upon morals, and because of this, morals should not become interesting one day and will remain today as they have always been. According to Nietzsche, no one in Europe has an idea of the fact that philosophizing concerning morals might be dangerous, captious, and an ensnaring manner that calamity might be involved. Sa pag-aaral ni Nietzsche, walang anumang bagong ideya at panibagong ekspresyon o interpretasyon sa mga lumang paniniwala, maski tamang impormasyon mula sa kasaysayan ng paniniwalang ito. An impossible literature, ika nga ni Nietzsche. In effect, the Old English vice called cant, which is moral tartuffism, that means bigotry or hypocrisy, has insinuated itself into these morals, concealed this time under the new form of the scientific spirit. Puritans must naturally suffer with a pang of conscience from tinkering with morals. In the end, they all want English morality to be recognized as authoritative among mankind, to cause happiness of the greatest number, but indeed, only the happiness of England will be served. This will cause people to convince themselves to strive for English happiness. Those who advocate the cause of egoism as conducive to the general welfare have no goal, no nature, and notion. In Nietzsche's opinion, that the idea of what is fair to one may not be fair to another. There is a distinction of rank between man and man, and consequently between morality and morality are only a scheme without objective basis. They are unassuming and fundamentally mediocre species of men. These are utilitarian Englishmen. The idea of what we so-called man has been the work of aristocrat society, which is why hanggang sa panahon ngayon, we still live in a society where rank and difference of worth exists that is also causing slavery. Nietzsche believed that without pathos of distance or the belief where social rank exists, then other mysterious pathos would have never arisen. Let us acknowledge how every higher civilization until now originated. Even men with a still natural nature, for example barbarians and men of prey, also desire for power. They threw themselves upon weaker, more moral, more peaceful races or upon old mellow civilization. They were superior not in terms of physical, but in their physical power. Nietzsche referred to them as complete men or complete beasts. To refrain from injury and violence, there is a good conduct among individuals when the necessary conditions are given, namely similarity, degree of worth, and their correlation within one's organization. However, when one wishes to take this principle more generally, and if possible even as a fundamental principle of society, then it would disclose what it really is, namely a will to denial of life. So to give you a better understanding of this principle, a will to denial of life is the principle of dissolution or decay. In this principle, a person must think deeply to the very basis and must avoid sentimental weakness. Life is essentially appropriation, injury, the conquest of the strange and weak, suppression, severity, obtrusion of peculiar forms, incorporation, and exploitation. But why is it that we are still using those words despite the fact that the idea of ranking indifference has been crushed? The best example would be an organization which, as we mentioned a while ago, treat each other equally. This is what we call will to power and does not owe to morality or immorality. Despite this, karamihan sa mga Europeans are not willing to be corrected. Nietzsche said that it sounds to him that they like to invent or create a society or mode of life which should refrain from exploitation. But little did they know that exploitation belongs to the nature of living, a consequence of the intrinsic will to power, precisely the will to life. Even though finer and coarser morality still prevails until now, there are certain traits recurring regularly together and connected with one another, until finally there are two primary types that were revealed to Nietzsche. These two are master morality and slave morality. According to him, there were also attempts to reconcile the two, but there is always a confusion and misunderstanding between the two moralities. The distinction of moral values have either originated in the ruling caste or the hierarchy of hereditary class. In the first case, when it is the rulers who determine the creation of good, it is regarded as the exalted or superior. In the first kind of morality, good and bad are being described as noble and despicable. Meanwhile, good and evil have different origins. It is a fundamental belief of aristocrats that the common people are untruthful. They are being labeled as cowardly, timid, insignificant, and even dog-like. It is obvious that everywhere the designators of moral value were first applied to men and were only applied to action in a later period.
In this part, let us discuss naman yung concept na binanggit sa readings about sa kung ano nga ba ang noble type of man. The noble type of man sees himself as a determiner of values. Someone na hindi kailangan ng approval ng iba for he passes the judgment na what is injurious to me is injurious in itself. Alam niya sa sarili niya and it is only he himself who confers honor on things and that he himself is the creator of values. Dahil it is more on himself, this morality is regarded as self-glorification for it gives a feeling of plenitude, power, which seeks to overflow. The happiness of high tension, the consciousness of wealth, which would fain give and bestow. Ipinagmamalaki niya kung ano man ang meron sa sarili niya, but it is also said that the noble man helps the unfortunate not out of pity, but from any impulse generated by the superabundance of power. A noble type of man honors himself, the powerful one, that it is himself who has power over himself. So technically, kapag sinabing noble man, ay parang kilalang-kilala na yung sarili niya and kayang mag-stand himself alone. Wotan placed a hard heart in my breast. Line mula sa isang old Scandinavian saga. It is some Viking man being proud of himself for his heart not being made from sympathy, just like how a hero should be. He also added, he who has not a hard heart when young will never have one. Parang sinasabi lang na kung pusong mamon ka even when you're young, wala kang puso. Those who think the same as him are noble and brave and are removed from the morality that seeks sympathy or acts well toward others, or disinterestedness characteristic of moral. They have faith in themselves, pride in themselves, embrace selflessness, and belong to the so-called noble morality. Gratitude, revenge, artfulness in retaliation, refinement of the idea and friendship, a certain necessity to have enemies because of emotions, envy, quarrelsome, arrogance are the typical characteristics of noble morality. All of these are noted as not the morality of moral ideas, for it is difficult to realize, unearth, and disclose. Speaking of power nga pala, mayroong noble reverences, also known as the morality of the powerful, ang nabanggit din sa readings namin. The belief and the prejudice in favor of ancestor and then favorable to the newcomers. For the morality of ruling class naman, this one is regarded as foreign and irritating to present-day taste. Meron itong principle na nagsasabing one has duty to one's equals, that one may act towards beings of a lower rank just to look good to one or as the heart desires, and in any case beyond good and evil. This is where sympathy and similar sentiments have a place. Now for the second type of morality, the slave morality. Nietzsche asked if the abuse of rest, suffering, unemancipated, weary, uncertain of themselves should moralize, what will be the common element in their moral estimates? He also answered that probably this one will have an expression through condemnation of man together with his situation. Sa mga mata o virtue ng powerful ones, ang slave ay unfavorable, that they have a skepticism, a refinement of distrust of everything good that is honor, and persuade themselves that the very happiness there is not genuine. Sa kabilang banda naman, those qualities serve to alleviate the existence of sufferers, brought into prominence, flooded with light. Those who have these qualities thou are the ones who embrace sympathy. There are all types of kindness, and that these are the most useful qualities for their existence. That is the reason why slave morality is regarded as the morality of utility. It is the type of morality where the origin of the antithesis good and evil started, where power and dangerousness reside in evil, and a certain dreadfulness, subtlety, and strength do not admit of being despised. Ayon sa konsepto ng slave morality, evil man arouses fear, pero according naman sa concept ng master morality, good man arouses fear and seeks to arouse it. Bad man is regarded as the despicable thing. Despite the differences, however, it is said that the contrast attains its maximum when, in accordance to the logical consequences of slave morality, at last attaches itself to the good man of this morality. According to the servile mode of thought, good man is equals to safe man, for they are good-natured, easily deceived, perhaps a little stupid. So basically, kapag daw mayroong slave morality, there are also a significance with the words good and stupid. Ngayon ay dumako naman tayo sa pagdidiscuss ng second part ng reading. Ang main point doon is that no one gives a man his qualities, hindi sigado ang pamilya. Wala ring responsibilidad ng iba kung nag-i-exist siya sa mundo o sa isang particular na environment, na ang pagkatao ng isang tao ay hindi resulta ng atensyon, kagustuhan o hangarin, and wala ring attempt at attaining to any ideal man, happiness, and morality. Inireiterate ni Nietzsche na tayo lang ang nag-impento ng concept ng purpose, pero in reality, the purpose is altogether lacking. One is necessary, one belongs to the whole. There is nothing that could judge, measure, compare, and condemn our existence, for that means judging, measuring, comparing, and condemning the whole. At dahil sinasabi na walang responsible sa kahit na ano, hindi na rin pwedeng i-connecta ang existence ng tao sa tinatawag na causa prima, na ang mundo ay isang entity, whole, or as a spirit, that the world should be saved or restored. Ang konsepto ni God ay isang malaking tutol sa concept ng existence noon. With that, the second reading ends with the sentence, "We deny God, we deny responsibility in God, but we do everything to save the world." For the third part of the reading, Nietzsche then talked about the concept of Christianity, which he regarded as the most fatal and seductive lie. He stated na ayaw niya magbigay ng any false position tungkol dito, but he encouraged the people to make a discourse or war about it. The morality of paltry people is discussed by Nietzsche in his book as the measure of all things. He stressed na ito na raw yung pinaka hindi katanggap-tanggap na degeneracy na na-create, for this kind of idea is still under the name of God over men's heads. Now, nabanggit na rin ng New Testament as intellectual cleanliness. When one touches it, one experiences inexpressible feelings of discomfort. The least qualified people give say in its pages about the greatest problems of existence, give judgment na minsan nga ay sobra-sobra na. The problem spoken here are life, world, God, and the purpose of life. Nietzsche said na ito na raw yung most fatal na kabaliwang nag-exist sa earth. When these little lying abortions of bigotry begin laying claims to the words God, last judgment, truth, love, wisdom, and Holy Spirit, and distinguish themselves from the rest of the world, begin to transvalue values to suit themselves, for they thought that they were sense, standard, and measure of all things.
Nietzsche also argued na ang mga batas kung saan pinipigilan nito ang maling aksyon ng isang tao ay hindi mismo pinipigilan ang kaisipan na nagiging sanhi upang magbigay buhay sa mga maling gawain ito. Kaya dito napapasok ang moral idealist na God sees into man's heart. The action itself counts for nothing. The reprehensible attitude of mind from which it proceeds must be extirpated. Meaning, nakikita ni God ang lahat, pati na sa loob ng puso natin. Kaya lahat ng ginagawa nating actions ay wala na lang din. Normally, sa mga lalaki, tinatawanan nila ang ganitong bagay. Pero in some cases, katulad na lang kung may gera sa isang komunidad, ay hininti nila ang mga maling gawain at nakikinig sila para ma-maintain ang order. This also goes with the case of Buddha, appeared among a people that was both peaceable and afflicted with great intellectual weariness. Katulad din nito ang case ng mga Jewish bilang unang Christian community dahil meron silang primary condition o yung tinatawag na unpolitical Jewish society. This book, sinabi ni Nietzsche na ang Christianity ay magpa-prosper in terms of Judaism, at ang mga taong nagbitaw ng political life ay nagled sa parasitic existence within the Roman sphere of government. Kasabay ng paglawak ng Christianity ay ang pagpipigil ng sangkatauhan sa kanilang mga sarili. Nietzsche is expelled from morality when it is said, love your enemies. So kapag sinabing mahalin mo ang iyong kapwa, hindi lang ang iyong sarili, nawawalan na siya ng katuturan sa tinatawag nating law. Now, sinasabi na dapat lahat yung pagmamahal na nararamdaman ng isang tao natin sa kanyang kapwa ay dapat genuine o may connection kay God. Dahil sa pangyayaring ito ay nawala ang natural origin ng morality. Noong kumalat ang concept o pagkakakilala ni God, utility has been withdrawn. Kasabay naman noon ang pagkalimot din ng mga tao sa natural morality. In layman's term, natural morality has been destroyed to the roots. Nagtanong din si Nietzsche kung bakit hindi tayo nandidiri sa konsepto ng eunuch. Ang paliwanag lang naman niya rito ay simple. Hindi raw ito patungkol sa mga kaisipan ng eunuch, for it is about isolating oneself without bitterness. Sa kabilang banda, sinabi niya rin na ang dapat isipin ng isang tao ay ang mga panganib at accidents na magdadala sa kanyang life of manly virtues. With that ay malalaman ng isang tao kung paanong ang isang napakalakas na lalaki ay kaya palang masilaw sa ningning ng kabutihan at kadalisayan. The astuteness of moral castration. In this part, it is stated that war waged against virile passions and valuations happened with no violent physical means, but with ruses, spells, and lies, or basically the so-called spiritual war. Para sa unang recipe ng astuteness of moral castration, nag-aangkop ang virtud sa pangkalatan at ginagawa itong pangunahing katangian ng isang mithiin, kung saan ang mas lumang ideal ay tinatanggihan at idinideklara na kabaliktaran ng lahat ng mithiin. At sinasabi na ang standard o paninirang puri ay kailangang pag-aralan para sa layuning ito. Ikalawang recipe. Ang mga nangyayari ay mayroong pangkalahatang pamantayan at ito ay tinakda sa lahat ng bagay, harap man o likod, maski ng tadhana bilang Diyos. Ikatlong recipe. Ang mga kalaban ng isang mithiin ay pinapahayag ng mga kalaban ng Diyos. Ipagpalagay na ang sarili ay mayroong isang karapatan sa kapighatian, kapangyarihan, at isang karapatang manumpa at pagbigay pagpapala. Ikaapat na recipe. Ang lahat ng pagdurusa, lahat ng kakilakilabot, kahindik-hindik at nakamamatay ng mga bagay ay ipinahayag ng mga resulta ng pagsalungat sa isipan ng isang tao, na ang lahat ng pagdurusa ay kaparusahan, maski ikaw man ay kanyang mga tagasunod o hindi. Ikalimang recipe. Ang isa ay umabot pa sa pagtingin ng kalikasan bilang kabaliktaran ng mithiin ng isang tao, at ang mahabang pamamalagi sa gitna ng mga natural na kondisyon ay tinuturing na isang mahusay na pagsubok ng pasensya, isang uri ng pagkamartir. Sabi nga sa isang pag-aaral, ang pag-uugali at katangian ng isang tao ay likas na bagay. Ika-anim na recipe. Ang tagumpay ng anti-naturalism at ideal castration ay ang tagumpay ng mundo, ng kadalisayan, kabutihan, malinis na kalooban at pinagpala ay tinakda sa hinaharap bilang isang katuparan, wakas, dakilang pag-asa at ang tinatawag na pagdating sa kaharian ng Diyos. Let us now move forward with the prejudice of Nietzsche on ancient philosophers. Sinabi niya sa readings na to what extent psychologists have been corrupted by moral idiosyncrasy. Not one had the courage to identify the theory of non-free will, meaning to say, the theory that denies morality. Not one had the courage to identify the typical features of happiness, or with the will to power, for the pleasure of power was considered immoral. And not one had the courage to regard virtue as a result of immorality. So parang sinabi niya na ang mga psychologists have gotten stuck sa mga moral prejudices or preconceptions and fears. So basically, tinanggap na lang ng mga ancient philosophers yung mga teorya at hindi na naghangat pa ng mas malalim na pag-aaral. Sabi niya rin na the chief features of all moral philosophers are their total lack of intellectual cleanliness and self-control. Meaning to say, most of the philosophers who are searching for the truth with the use of clear objective method without any trace of prejudices actually comes with it. So sa madaling salita, binabash niya ang mga philosophers kasi para sa kanya, ang claim sila ay hindi nanggaling sa malinis na ideolohiya. He insinuated na all philosophers use a dirty knife in their theory or philosophy. Kasi naman ang mga philosophers na ito already have preconceived notions or preconceptions that cloud their judgment, thus affecting their search for the truth. Kaya naman ang buong moral evolution na nangyari before him ay walang bahid ng katotohanan. Ibig sabihin, ang lahat ng conceptual elements ng mga philosophers ay kathang-isip lamang. Lahat ng psychological beliefs ay mali, at lahat ng logic na ginamit ay mga nakakalinlang na argumento. So masasabing ang mga virtue na ito nanggawa sa hindi konkretong kaisipan ay naging highest form of seduction kung saan ang mga tao ay naging hindi rin sigurado at kalaunan nangyayari ang pagtalikod sa mundo. Ang mga sophist, ang mga guro na nagtuturo ng filosofiya, ang unang pumuna sa moralidad at una ring kaalaman ng moralidad. Sa pamamagitan ng kanilang makaalaman at pagtingin, ay nagkaroon ng klasifikasyon ang ilang pagpapahalagang moral upang magkasama-sama. Gusto nila kasing iparating sa bawat tao na ang lahat ng anyo ng moralidad ay kayang maintindihan. Ipagpalagay nila na ang lahat ng pangunahing prinsipyo ng moralidad ay dapat na maging sophistical. Isang proposition na kalaunan ay napatunayan bilang isang pinakamataas na estilo ng mga ancient philosophers mula kay Plato hanggang kay Kant. Ipagpalagay nila na ang pangunahing katotohanan na walang moral per se at good per se. O sa madaling salita, ay walang moralidad at kabutihan. At isang kabaliwan na pag-usapan ang katotohanan sa ganitong mga bagay.
At dito na nagtatapos ang ating balitaan. Muli, ako si Angel Guaño, nag-uulat mula sa Pasig City.
Ako si Fatima Marcial, ang inyong kaagapay mula sa Quezon City.
At ako naman muli si Cyril Mainit, nagbabalita mula sa Manila City.
Magandang araw at maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
18 days
18 days na lang,
Pasko
Pasko na!